This is a Culture Inject production.
Welcome back to all of our listeners. I'm Laura, and welcome back to another Nevers podcast. In case you've missed us and you've forgotten about us, here's a little bit about the podcast. You can stream the Nevers podcast on Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, and anywhere else that you can stream podcasts. You can visit our website, hbothenevers.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at HBO The Nevers. And if you have any comments, questions, topic suggestions, anything, you can send those all over to theneverspodcast at gmail.com. Just want to give another massive thank you to all of our listeners for your support and reviews, all the letters that you send us. It's really great to know that you're enjoying our show, so thanks. Today's discussion, we're doing something a little bit different. So we are discussing the Galanthi, and I won't be going it alone either. Joining me is Jason C. Marshall. Jason will be sitting in for Chirag while he's away. Jason is a contributing writer for our website, hbothenevers.com. His articles include The Curious Case of Lavinia Bidlow, Portals and Spores and AI, Oh My, A Hitchhiker's Guide to Time Travel, and we need to talk about Myrtle and the Galanthi and analysis, which we'll be talking about today. Jason also produces video analysis, which you can view on our website, and mini analysis of the Nevers on his Instagram account. So, Jason, thank you for being here and sitting in for Chirag. Can you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, your thoughts on the Nevers thus far, and what you do when you're not writing analysis for our website?
Yes, I absolutely can. And first of all, thank you for having me. And I've been looking forward to chatting with you. A bit about myself. I hate talking about myself. So the basics where I'm from, Ottawa, Canada, the capital city. Actually, I'm like a 10-minute walk from our government buildings. So it's kind of cool. It's a nice little walk to go downtown. Has nothing to do with what we're talking about, though. As for myself, I am a filmmaker, a little less so lately because I've been focusing on screenwriting because my films weren't any good, and I had to figure out why. Kind of look back over them. I was like, okay, well, the idea and the execution were two different things. So let's figure out what's going on there. And I kind of went down that rabbit hole, and now I'm more on a helping other people, beginners and intermediates in particular, write good scripts for their films. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing when I'm not doing my day job. As for the Nevers, I actually fell into it by accident. I was making dinner one night, and my partner turned it on, and I came in right when True is fighting the bad guys who are kidnapping Myrtle, and then when she punched that guy out the window, I was like, okay, I'm hooked. I really enjoyed that. So okay, so she's tough, and then as the show went on, like the first episode went on, there's this outward projection of the strong character, but Laura Donnelly plays it with a vulnerability and damage that's super, super subtle, but it comes out, and I'm like, I am very, very much into this character.
Well, is this the first time that you've kind of done in-depth writing about a TV show?
Yes. I actually didn't plan to. I didn't plan to do a scene-by-scene analysis on my Instagram. I just, as I was watching the show, all the things that I've been talking about in screenwriting training were really popping out to me. The foreshadowing and use of doublespeak is really that in particular popped out to me because there's so much in it. In the first episode when Horatio is stitching up True, and they're talking about the dress, and he's like, it's a good dress, it'll keep pressure on the wound. And he gets this little look over his shoulder. I'm like, that's not about the dress. And of course, then we find out about their relationship fairly soon after. And just little things like that really, really, really popped out to me. I'm like, I'm just going to kind of write about the things that I thought were interesting, and that just evolved into the scene-by-scene breakdown, because it was just the easiest way to go about it.
Yeah. Are you a fan of other, like, previous Whedon works, or is this your first kind of...
Actually, I've been through them all, kind of in a weird reverse order. I actually started with Serenity and went to see it in the theater, and it's a particular favorite, because at the time I was like, just Star Trek was like, this is top of the line for sci-fi, because I mean, growing up throughout the 80s and 90s, sci-fi TV wasn't super great, especially in the 90s. But then I saw Serenity, and I'm like, okay, this is what sci-fi can be. And then I went back to Firefly, and then Buffy and Angel, and honestly, I wasn't super into Dollhouse or Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but definitely the Firefly and Serenity are kind of top of my Whedon fan list.
Yeah, I think this show, I was kind of like, I didn't want to get my hopes up too much from watching other things, but at the same time, I was kind of like, well, it looks awesome. And yeah, like you said, straight from the beginning, I was kind of hooked. Again, like you said, with like all the subtleties, like it doesn't scream out at you like begging you to like it. It's like all that stuff that's underneath, and it's really understated, and it just kind of, that really reels me in.
Oh yeah, it's a super talented cast, and the way they can portray subtext is so good. And I think, and this comes back to my screenwriting thing, is that that opening, that first 14 minutes, we get the first montage, and then essentially the second montage, which is shows the differences in true and penance, and the efficiency of storytelling and the showing, not telling, is, oh, Laura, it was chef's kiss.
So thank you for joining us again, and we'll delve straight into the discussion. So like I said at the beginning, this episode is about the Galanthi. I suppose we should start by talking about who they are. I mean, I guess, just on the basics, there's some kind of alien species. They're way more advanced than humans, because possibly that, we're thinking that they're here to save the Earth or save humanity. But like, is there any other like major big points that we know about them?
Oh my god, it's funny because there's so little to go on, but it's a weird way to look at it. There's so little, but there's also so much. I can't think of a better way to describe it, because it's just in little things. And one thing, so the first article I wrote for The Nevers, Matthew had specifically requested something on the Galanthi. And like, okay, I can do that up, and kind of went back through the episodes and looked stuff up, and approached it as a, here's fact, and then here's my feelings on it. But in the video I did that's going to go up with this, I actually talk about something I missed, and that was Lucy's elephant brooch, because it was in episode 2 it was so prominently featured. And in good television, they don't focus on something if it's not important or pay off later. Now, I think we'll see how the show plays out, but I do feel like we'll see what happens with that. But I think the immediacy of it was foreshadowing, because you got the little elephant brooch, and then in episode 6, there's only those 2 kind of clearest shots of the Galanthi when Byner's looking at the video feed. And it definitely has that elephant look to it. I'm like, oh, foreshadowing. That thing I've been talking about. But the payoff was so far down the line. I'm like, I didn't see it originally, so it's not in that first article. And something literally just occurred to me as you as you mentioned, what do we know? They come through portals, and we know the portal they used goes back in time. And I'm like, are they aliens? Or are they, I don't want to say future humans, but future evolved species from Earth? It's not a complete idea. It's just kind of something that kind of popped into my head as you were talking. So
yeah, no, those are the best ideas. Yeah. Yeah, I've not thought about that either, actually. Yeah, you're right, because obviously it's come from the future, or at least that one that we know of has come from the future. So they have the ability to travel in time. That's definitely a possibility that they're not from another planet or another galaxy or whatever, but they're just from the future of Earth.
And that's the thing, and this is kind of more of a thinking back to previous Whedon works. Like even in Firefly, there were no aliens; it was just humans. So I'm like, well, maybe it's not. I mean, it's. But this is the fun, right? We get to we get to watch this show we love. And we get to theorize and riff, and then see how it plays out. And there's a, right or wrong. There's a. I mean, obviously, it's super satisfying when you turn out to be right.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult because on the one hand, it's kind of like I don't necessarily always enjoy TV shows that are crazy, over the top, complicated. And I have mentioned in the podcast before that a lot of the time when time travel gets involved, depending on how it's used, I lose interest because I don't like shows when they kind of like, oh, here's a whole season of stuff that you've watched and invested yourself in, and then we're going to throw in some time travel and kind of make all of that redundant and not necessary to the story anymore because we've just kind of erased it all from our timeline. And then I kind of get annoyed because I'm like, oh, I've just invested all my time in this, and now you're basically saying, like, as the writers and the show, that it didn't matter, and you're just kind of going back on what you've done. So I'm hoping that this isn't going to go down like a too time travel-y route. So I guess because I'm enjoying it, I think sometimes you can enjoy something if it's more simpler, if it's got a good story and good characters. It doesn't need to go crazy over the top complicated. So half of me is like not wanting to delve too deep into it, but the other half is like you just can't stop thinking about it and thinking about all the possibilities while we're waiting for the next season to come.
Oh my God, I am with you there. There's yeah, and like anything that writers come up with later, like I said, you do a time travel thing. It's like, oh well, we're gonna basically rewrite everything we did. It's like, well, there's no stakes then. Yeah, like everything you've established is kind of pointless, and if they can just go fix it with the magical time machine or the magical repair device or whatever the thing is in a given show, it's like, well, it's hard to get invested if you can just, with the flick of a switch, fix it, as it were. Yep. Yeah, I think, well, that's always a worry. I think with Horatio, his ability is not like, it's not like super healing. It's him using, his know-how as a doctor to literally stitch people back together. Because instantly when you give someone a healing ability, it's kind of like, oh, well, none of the characters are going to die because as long as they get back to him quick enough, they'll be okay. That's an excellent point. It's something I thought about, but yeah, whenever he's working on someone, he's literally doing hand motions, and that first time was true, right? You see the wound closing up like it's being stitched, but he talks about be careful, you could. Like don't pull your stitches, like don't be too active, or be careful for infection. So it's not perfect, but it's that's a very, very nice touch. That's a good catch. Yeah, because I think and for me personally, if I'm watching a show and like an action show like this with a lot of fights and a lot of action where people are hating each other and there's gonna be murder and stuff, like. If you genuinely think that none of the main cast are ever going to die, and there's no stakes, I just kind of get a bit bored. Because, yeah, it's kind of like, what is the point of watching a high-action show if you don't think any of the characters are ever going to die? If you genuinely think the writers aren't brave enough to kill off their own characters, and that's one of the things from previous Whedon shows, is that they'd always kind of been brave enough to get rid of some of their high-profile characters, so... Oh, yeah, exactly. That's why, I know there was some some debate I saw online about, killing Mary so early. I'm like, yeah, but you need to, because we need to know that these people aren't safe. Even in numbers, they're not safe. And you can say it, and you can have them say it to each other, but unless you demonstrate it, it's hard to feel it as an audience member.
So back to Galanthi,
Yes.
we just kind of touched on where they're from, whether, we're not 100% sure. Are they from the future, another galaxy, Earth, just down the line? But, I guess if they're from another galaxy or another dimension, how did they learn about humans on Earth, and also why would they venture? Because I guess for me, the first question when they, like in that 6th episode, we first learn about them, it's what are their motives, and did they really come, like Nita says, to help save Earth and save humans and pass on all this like future technology? Or is there an ulterior motive? Because even between that one singular Galanthi that's come back to the Victorian times to help, or seemingly help, to all of the other Galanthi, we don't know, if the Galanthi is like a population of a far distant planet or galaxy, if they all get along and they all have the same beliefs, or if just a few of them have separated to come and find other planets and supposedly help. There's so many questions still.
Yeah. So I just wrote an article about Myrtle, which took me forever because I knew I wanted to say things about Myrtle, but I couldn't find my way in, is the best way to describe it. And then it kind of hit me there last weekend. And after like a month of trying to figure it out, I knocked it out in like an hour. But one of the things that popped into my head as I was doing is that I could be way off base here, but looking at the Galanthi and looking at the story, I feel like it's possible that the Galanthi character was influenced, like its development was influenced by the Vorlons from Babylon 5, because there are some parallels to it. And this is when you're asking how they learned of our existence. In Babylon 5, if you're not familiar, the Vorlons are an older race, and they basically stayed behind to help the younger races. Humans and Minbari, but they stay behind. There's a visually, the Galanthi in its kind of glowing blue state looks like a Vorlon out of its encounter suit. The Vorlons, they make mention that they can break off pieces of their consciousness and basically implant them in people and kind of, see and hear what's going on out there, which there could be a connection to the spores in that case, because we know that, Mary was the voice of the Galanthi, so there has to be some sort of, telepathic might be the best word for it, connection to them. So it kind of bundles up the two questions. How do they learn about us and what do they want? I would like to believe that, as far as their wants, that to take them at their word. I don't think there's been, narratively wise, there's been nothing to show us that they're being untrue. They're just like, hey, you guys done screwed up. We're here to help you out of this mess. Mm-hmm. But you're a genre fan. Do you think I'm like way off base here, or?
No, I think my first instinct was that, yeah, they're just here to help. I'm wondering how far the show is going to go into delving into like the Galanthi backstory, as it were. Like, I don't know whether they're going to do, of the next 6 episodes, it's going to be similar to Dollhouse, where they'll have 5 episodes really just based back where we are, and then the last episode looking more to that future. Or if it's kind of all coming into one now, because obviously everybody's aware of the Galanthi, and it's going to be just very highly focused on this Galanthi here, and, cracking it open and kind of reconnecting with all of that. So it'd be interesting to see in these next 6 episodes how much contact is made to this Galanthi, whether it be through Myrtle or, through it actually kind of coming back out of its little stasis pod type thing, as it were.
Yeah.
And whether also, I'm kind of worried that it's just going to die, that whatever Dr. Haig and Bidlow are doing, that it's just before we find anything out anytime soon, that something's going to happen.
I mean,
to
it once again, this is something that just popped into my head as you were talking about. I mean, it's possible that, you know, the Galanthi as a character, we'll say, may not exist beyond the end of the first season, because right now it's the driving narrative force. Like they're like, we got to find the Galanthi, we got to help the Galanthi, we got to figure this out. But at some point, having a real live shape-shifting, ultra-powerful alien in 1899 London will screw up that narrative, because then it's that whole thing. You basically have the cheat code. Well, I can just basically do anything I want, and it may serve more as an impact character, which is like your Obi-Wan Kenobi or whatnot. It provides guidance to the main characters, and then to propel the story forward, the impact character, mentor, whatnot will die. So they may get, and once again, this is just a theory that literally I'm forming as we're talking. You know, the end of the season may be, you know, I don't want to say death, but the end of the Galanthi. But the main characters will get enough answers to have a way forward through future seasons.
Yeah.
So once again, this is literally forming in my brain as we're talking. Because, like I said, it's a whole, because like I said, my thing is filmmaking and writing, so I'm approaching all these analyses from that point of view of, hey, you know, in storytelling, what we've seen, what we experienced, how would this play out in a natural way, or a way that we're familiar with.
And like I said at the beginning, it's kind of like, do I crazily overthink everything and try to like come at this from every angle and think about every single little possibility? Or do we just kind of like sit back and let it, you know, and go for the ride? Because I feel like thinking about it now, obviously you're saying that the Galanthi is like the main driving narrative of the first 6 episodes. But I mean, obviously we see the ship or whatever go over. We see the Galanthi go over it at the beginning, but after that we're not really, you know, we don't actually learn about its existence fully until and know what it is, other than like some blue glowy orb underground, until the very final episode. So it's kind of like, if it is that main driving force, it's kind of like we didn't learn about it till so late, literally like right at the end. And then if you're not someone that will go back and rewatch the show, and you kind of like, oh, okay, now you know, and you like see what's happening. It's kind of like, are we going to get like really Galanthi heavy like next 6 episodes, or is it going to kind of drop back to the Galanthi is just this thing and like more in the background again until like the end of that next 6 episodes? I don't know.
I feel like the next 6 are basically going to be like the heist. We need to, okay, we know where the Galanthi is now. Now we need to form a plan to save it from the bad guys, or perceived bad guys, because that whole Lavinia Haig lobotomized, altered, touched. That it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Do you remember watching it? Did you feel like in episode 4 when they finally started saying Galanthi, it kind of came out of nowhere?
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. It was kind of... Yeah, thinking back to that first pass, and this is a case where I think the doublespeak and the foreshadowing didn't work in the showrunner's favor, because I think they hid the Galanthi a little too well over those first 3 episodes. So when in episode 4 they say, we're going to get the Galanthi, you're like, what the hell is the Galanthi? So yeah, that is literally the only thing that bothered me about the first half of season 1, is that the first pass, it felt like it came out of nowhere. Obviously, even though it didn't, because we saw the orb, there were some hints at it, but still, that element of the storytelling was a little too well hidden, I feel. Yeah, it's hard to imagine, because I was kind of like watching each episode probably about twice. And the second time was like, the first time was watching it, enjoying it. And then the second time was kind of like more analytical, watching it like for the podcast. It's hard to imagine what it was like just watching episodes 1 through 6 with like, just as a viewer. And I can imagine, and the same way that like my in-laws and my mum, they really enjoyed it, but were also a bit kind of like, whoa, that last episode, you know, just came out of nowhere and it built very quickly. And I can imagine because they wouldn't have been going through like we were and like really picking up on all these little things, like when she's with Desiree and she, you know, she says half the word and then, like say, it's like slowly peeling away something that ends up being the huge, you know, reveal and this like very, very, very important part of the story. It is possibly too hidden for some people to have maybe enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was definitely, like you said, it's in writing we actually call it hiding the ball, and it's one of those things where you're building the mystery, but you don't leave enough breadcrumbs so that when something finally becomes apparent, you're like, well, where the heck did that come from? This is going to be a little off topic. Did you ever watch Revolution when it came out back in, I want to say like 2017 or something? The one where all the electricity on Earth stops working?
I was just going to say, was it that one? Because I watched I think possibly the first episode. And then I don't know if it was on at a weird time in the UK or we just kind of never went back to it. But I remember enjoying the first episode and being like, oh, what's going to happen? And then I just never watched any more of it.
Okay, so here's what happened with this show. So NBC bought 13 episodes, but then the first episode did really, really well. So they bought another 13 to finish the season. But the problem was they filmed a cohesive narrative for 13 episodes, and they were trying to find Danny, the son that was kidnapped by the bad guys. And that was the narrative engine for the first 13 episodes. And then they find him, and then he gets immediately killed, which truthfully I was kind of down for because, once again, stakes. And he didn't really serve a purpose beyond that point because of how they wrote it. But the problem was that they got these extra 13 episodes and the show kind of fell apart because they didn't develop enough to fall back on. And the reason I bring that up is that that's kind of where I'm at with season 1A and 1B of The Nevers. So we have the Galanthi as this driving narrative, right? So that's kind of the whole thing with like, what is it? Where is it? We have to find it. Of course, you build this other mystery, like, you know, the touched and the spores and all that stuff. With this big narrative break and the change in leadership at the top, are they going to stick to this original plan they developed for when they originally had 10 episodes? Because clearly, based on everything we've seen, they've mapped everything out in extreme detail. But because they changed it from 10 episodes to 12 episodes with a split in the middle, how is that going to affect the storytelling? And fingers crossed, they just expanded on their original plans and kept all this depth and subtext they've had so far to get to the end of the season. And I hope it doesn't fall apart in the second half of the season like Revolution did. Revolution was on a network show where there's a lot of interference. I'm hoping that The Nevers being on HBO, they've been given the freedom to tell their story as they see fit without too much interference.
Yeah, see, I'm kind of like not sure because I was really kind of confused with the whole like having a 2-part season with like such a big break in the middle. It just doesn't happen. Like it happens in anime. You get like the first half of the season, then you get a little break often for the holidays or whatever, and then you get like the second half of the season. And anime is also split up very much. If it's like a long 24 episode anime, your first 12 episodes is like a story from A to B, and then your second half of the season is like another little chunk of story from A to B. Whereas if you're expecting like the Nevers, so like are we expecting the Nevers? We've reached a goal. kind of at the end of episode 6, right? We've gone from like 1 to 6, and we had like some form of cohesive journey where we've come to an end. It is a cliffhanger-y, but it is also kind of closed, kind of neat little ending for a season, if it were. But now we're going to have like season 1 part B instead of just going to like a season 2. So then, yeah, because is it going to be if they get like picked up again and it becomes like a successful show, the next season 2 will just be like 12 straight episodes because they'll be given the budget for that? Because yeah, having like 2 6-part episode, like it is kind of strange as a viewer to not just think of it as a season, like a whole season. Because then it's like, oh, now we need like almost a whole new like little journey for this next 6 episodes. Is it gonna rein in at all and kind of come back to that, we're regathering our forces, they're all in one group now, it's gonna like rein in and be a bit kind of like treading the water and then build again? Or are we gonna pick straight up from this like, we're all here, we're together, and it's gonna be like go, go, go from the very first episode?
Hey, I'm on another podcast where I talk about storytelling and story structure. I've only done 3 I've only done 3 episodes. It's the Susie Botello podcast. Now she's all about mobile filmmaking, but we're kind of talking about story now to like, hey, you can make a movie on your phone, but now we can help you make a great movie on your phone. In storytelling, the midpoint, which is the midpoint, obviously, it's that big action piece in the moment of a movie. Where, the good guys win or the good guys lose or whatnot. And it, once again, this is stuff that's kind of coming to me through our talking. We might be okay for the second half of season 2 because what we've literally just had is the midpoint of the season. And once again, in movies, you have the midpoint, which is either a false victory or false defeat, because what happens in the midpoint will impact what happens about, 2/3 of the way through the movie, or in this case, 2/3 of the way through the season. So I want to say this is even though they didn't save the Galanthi, we have a victory. They got to it, and True got some answers, and we got more questions. But everything that happened in that midpoint is going to impact everything that follows it for the second half of the season. Looking at the first half of the season, narratively, it follows the same structure as a movie. So logically, the second half will follow the same structure where you have, you raise the stakes and, the bad guys step it up. And then, you have that moment or two where everything is lost and like, how are we going to recover from this? And then they regroup and come up with a plan and beat the bad guy. The long and short of that is that this mid-season break, although extremely long, I think from a good storytelling standpoint, I think we're going to get some really good pay. I don't know what they're going to be, but I think we're going to get some good payoffs in the second half of the season.
There's so many unanswered questions about the Galanthi that really you need to kind of talk about the show as a whole to kind of try and wrap your head around where it's going to go and what the Galanthi are going to mean. But when I interviewed Amy Manson, and she seems really psyched for whatever's going to happen in the second half. When it's like, and it was like real excitement. You can tell.
That's awesome. When
you see an interview with like an actor and they're like talking about the project they're working on, but you can tell they're not really into it, or they're just kind of talking because they're being forced to. But like, but then you talk to people and they're like truly psyched about like what they're working on, and it's an exciting project. And that they're like, if the actor working on it is really into the writing and the direction the show's taken, then it's kind of like excites you because it's like, oh, there must be some really exciting shit about to happen.
That seems to be a thing with the Nevers. The excitement from the cast is palpable. You can feel it, and it's contagious.
Yeah, I think it's definitely... so I'm looking forward to the next 6. In terms of the Galanthi, so like, what do they want? What are they doing? So my first instinct, they're here to help. Wherever they've come from, they've come to help. And then it's kind of like, so they've really tried to help in that future. right? They've tried to help because of global warming or whatever's,
all the stuff we did.
all that stuff. And because of humanity and what it's like, they failed in the future. And then you get this lone Galanthi that's like, well, I'm going to take this shot. Here's a window. Here's an opening. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take this shot to go back and try and fix it earlier. In a time when humans don't have as much power. Because if you think about in Victorian times, humans haven't got as much power to fight against stuff, right? Like, in the future that they were in, you're talking like nuclear warfare, whatever technology the humans have got in the future to fight back against the Galanthi who are, we think, trying to help them. Whereas in Victorian times, they've not got that. It's a time where they can really influence better and try and change the world at a much earlier date.
Yeah, then that was one of the big things I did in my first article, the Galanthi analysis over on the website, and it's the because it's the when they're in the future, they're true, not true. Sorry, Zephyr. I guess they're all the same character, but Zephyr and Knitter are looking at all this stuff, and there's the butterflies, with all the other stuff. I'm like, okay, well, it's the butterfly effect. They need to go back to a point where small changes will have huge impacts over the course of the timeline. And yeah, so basically, from a relative standpoint, humanity is weaker as it were. Technologically, but this is also right before the 20th century where we as humans really turned it on, as it were, and just started making stuff and pumping out greenhouse gases and wars and all the stuff. So you're right. The choice of where they went makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that display case in the future. Yeah, I spent a lot of paused moments on that.
Oh, exactly, and that's the thing with the show. Pay attention to the cutaways when characters are talking and they cut away to what looks like a random shot, like in the first episode where Myrtle brings the dress in, and Horatio and True are talking, and then they cut away to Myrtle opening like a little hand fan for what seems like no reason at all. But then when True's having her little PTSD episode in the theater, the first shot is an audience member opening a fan very loudly. So yeah, like you said, it's the pay attention because it's all there. They've done such a good job of showing it.
Yeah, this leads us as well to I'm really hoping that it's not. I don't know what your view is on the other big theories, not necessarily pertaining to the Galanthi, but just the show as a whole, is the whole simulation thing. So for me, again, time travel ruins things sometimes. It would be a real shame for me personally if it was this is just a simulation of some kind. Or
I'm with you 100%, because if it's a simulation, that is stupid. I trying to use gentle terms, but if it's a simulation, there's no stakes. But once again, this is my feeling from a narrative perspective. Based on everything they've shown us, there's no... Yes, they've talked about sim strips and simulations, but beyond referencing them and binary using them, there's no hard-hitting evidence to say they're in a simulation. Because based on how the first 6 unfolded, we have an established story, and if they did think there was in a simulation, or pardon me, if it was meant to be in a simulation, there would be hints or foreshadowing of it much, much earlier. So I think we're pretty safe in that's not a concern, and I really, really hope it's not a concern, because...
But it is interesting that they have this case full of things from the Victorian era. So the Doctor, whoever is working with the Galanthi, is clearly interested in this era. Was the Doctor working with the Galanthi in a way that they knew that the Galanthi could travel back in time and that this was like a possible plan, you know, for them to go back and do this. And they were like researching when is the best point to go back, and were they looking at particular people? Because if these are like records of real people's lives and our main cast back in the Victorian era, they would have all had very different lives, right, than what's happening right now. You know, Amalia would have died, and that was the end of her story. And then, you know, everybody else would have had a different story. Was it like a conscious effort, possibly, and a plan between the Doctor and the Galanthi, that if everything went wrong in current times, the Galanthi would go back, and particularly to these people, because they'd figured out this will be like their best place and their best shot to do it?
That's actually my firm belief in the series. And actually, I think the next time we talk, we're going to talk about the second article I wrote, and that's where I kind of go into my theories on that. That yeah, this station, this research lab they found, it was always the plan. Like, okay, where there's the the Galanthi the Galanthi can make portals, but I guess in this case the satellites made the portals. Like when Biner's on the computer, he activates something and then the little graphic shows up. But yeah, I think that because it feels like. Did you ever watch Travelers?
No.
It was I think it was on Showtime. I'm not sure. Basically, it's a very similar idea that people from the future transport their consciousness back to the past, and they've used, but like when the past being like, you know, our present, and they've used things like, you know, all these records from social media and whatnot to know who to transfer themselves into. I only watched like half of the first season, so I'm not super up on it. But there feels like echoes of that. And yeah, I think you're right that they did all this research to find, we're gonna, you know, this science team, we're gonna train for 1896 using the sim strips, and then we're going to, the Galanthi's going to take us back and implant is the best word I can think of, us in recently deceased people, because this is jumping ahead, but I'm all about Biner being Hugo, because there's just too much evidence to state otherwise. And it's the drowning in, is it episode 1 or episode 2, where Hugo and Masson have their little confrontation at the club?
I think that's 2, yeah.
Okay, and Masson's like, your brother should have died instead of you. And I'm like, huh. And of course, then in the future vision from episode 6, we see Hugo, what looks like drowning, in like that 1 or 2 second clip. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if Hugo and his brother were both supposed to have died when they were swimming. And then, you know, the Galanthi's like, I'm going to put Biner in this guy. Yeah, so there's really, like, when you really look at, there's a lot of evidence for that. But yeah, I know. I think you're absolutely right. This was the plan. We looked at records. We did training. We were going to go back. Then, of course, the PDC kills the lab, the scientists. And then it's like, okay, well, we're out of time, so I got to figure something out. I'm going to scoop these people up who are still alive and take them with me.
So why then do we think the Galanthi? What I know we touched on earlier, that you think that there could possibly be future humans or future Earthlings of some kind, but have they specifically chosen to help Earth and help humans? Do we think that they're traveling around the galaxy or the universe helping everyone, or do we think this is a particular cause for whatever reason?
That is a big question. Oh, jeez. I hadn't even thought of the bigger implications beyond, you know, like, hey, it's, you know, they're like, hey, look at these humans are in trouble. Let's help them out. But I mean, could the Galanthi be a much bigger element on the galactic stage, as it were? It's possible. Like, you know, okay, well, you know, that is a possibility, because we there's been a whole bunch of various little like scientific articles written about like why haven't we met aliens and whatnot. And there's a big consensus. I've seen like IFL Science on Facebook has a lot of great articles they put up. And every now and again, there's these little things come up. It's like, why haven't we met aliens? Like, well, because when species reach a certain point of development, they either destroy themselves or they don't. It's like, oh, I wonder, yeah, maybe it is a helpful race who goes and helps younger races from destroying themselves.
So I guess looking more closely at this, like what we've seen specifically. Well, first of all, the Galanthi put out these spores, right? So do we think that they randomly choose who gets them, or because it's quite a lot of people and it seemed to be randomly spread when they've come back to the Victorian age, but we were also just talking about whether they specifically chosen certain people through research. But was it deliberate, you think, then, who was given a turn and what they were given? What's your take?
Well, once again, this is jumping ahead to my other article, Spores and Portals and AI, oh my. So I do have a theory that the Rex AI has impacted the Galanthi. So I believe, here's my belief based on my viewings of the show so far. The original plan was always to go back to 1896. They're going to take the scientists with them, deposit them into predetermined, recently dead people. Because I mean, they're not terrible people. They're not going to take over a body that's in use. And the spores were going to land on people, and basically give them the ability to, as I said, understand Galanthi language and technology. And the scientists that went back were essentially going to act as the shepherds to build a better world because it's also the empathic element, right? And having empathy for other people is what makes the world better, not worse. So the Galanthi and the scientists were going to then use that, like all these people who got spored and could understand the Galanthi and had more empathy and whatnot to build a better future. But with everything that went down at the lab, and it just there's a graphic where when the firewall goes up, parts of the Rex AI are still on the wrong side of the firewall, on the Galanthi side. So it's possible that all these people weren't supposed to be given superpowers, but because of everything that happened, they just do. Like there's a weird interaction between the Galanthi spores and how the Rex AI works. That, okay, well, instead of just being able to understand language and technology, you can see electricity and you can control fire and you can do this and that. So I don't think the plan was to make Victorian X people, but it just kind of happened. And because, yeah, like I said, obviously the plan went to garbage, and the Galanthi's kind of improvising now.
I mean, before talking with you and thinking about this whole, the science lab in the future, and it seems like it may have been planned by the scientists to go back to particular people, I would have thought that it was just random, like who got it, who got the spores. Mm-hmm. I didn't think it was random what turn they get. I think it's directly correlating to so their personality and things about them.
I'm with you on that, absolutely. So I think it's like a two-way thing. Like, the spore lands and it has its whatever programming it has, but then it kind of jives with the individual. And so because I feel like Lucy felt weak and she wanted to be strong, and who's the tall one? Primrose. She was little and she wanted to be big. And, that the interpretation of big was giant versus adult.
Yeah, I do think, the turns are great. I think, and I just had this thought. So when Amalia, who we now know as Zephyr, reaches the Galanthi underground, she obviously has a bit of like a moment. And then we have the whole moment with the big flash forward where she's seemingly seeing lots and lots of clips of like quite far in the future, right? And then eventually Myrtle. But so that's like Do you think that's the Galanthi like energy, supercharging her turn? And another question is, if she controls her anxiety in the near future, we're now letting go of all this. Her friends, family know, who she is, what she is, and she's got this best friend who trusts her. If she can kind of control her anxiety, do we think that she will have more control and she will be able to see further into the future? And this just popped into my head randomly.
Actually, and when you say that made me think of something else. So this is why I love these conversations, because see, we're riffing and the ideas are flowing. You might be right, because so Lucy always wears the gloves, right? Because she can't control her powers. But in that scene where she's fighting True, she touches crates and she touches the pendant and she touches things with her bare hand and doesn't destroy them. So I think that's a hint that they can all get control of their power. And if Amalia can kind of get a handle on these ripples and have some, maybe not measure control over what she sees, but when she sees, like it doesn't just happen at random intervals. She can concentrate and make it happen versus it just happening to her. That's a possibility. Oh, and something else I thought of is in that montage she sees some of Molly's memories, and I'm wondering how that's going to play out. Like, is Molly still in there?
She's still in there
in some fashion, or is it just hey, you're in this body. I think you're ready to see some of their experiences to better. I don't know. I don't have any. Yeah, I got nothing there. I just think it's interesting that they showed it, but that fits into my theory about Biner being true, because I was talking to someone online, and they're like, yeah, but Biner can't be Hugo because Hugo has all his own memories. But then we see in that montage the Galanthi giving Zephyr Molly's memories. So
yeah.
I'm wondering if that's the connection there. I mean, time will tell, but something I just thought about is that the big thing is anyone who does think that Biner is in Hugo thinks their belief is that Biner believes he's just in a simulation. In episode 6, when the riot happens, you notice he hits his temple, When he gets knocked over and he hits his temple, right where he puts the sim strips.
Yep. And
then he's kind of like, I just watched it the other day. He kind of has this weird moment, and it almost looks like some sort of understanding or flashback or like I can't even describe it.
I only just thought about the whole, she has this big montage of flash forwards when she's, in contact with the Galanthi. So yeah, does the Galanthi have, if they were to free the Galanthi, or at least all come into contact with it at some point, will they all become those supercharged ex-Victorians?
Well, yeah, because I think they mentioned at some point they're missing their empath, and I think you and Shirag had talked about this, that it's likely that Malady is the empath that would essentially guide all the other touched, and I think they need that element to train, essentially, as it were, train them how to use their turns. Oh my god, it's so interesting! I can't wait to see how it unfolds, because I'm very, very much into this story and this show.
So, moving on to Myrtle. So Myrtle's got a close connection with the Galanthi because she's the only one that understood their language, which is huge, right? Mm-hmm. And you've just written a pretty Myrtle-heavy article that blew my mind.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it, because it took me a month to write this. It just I had little bits and pieces, but it just wasn't coming. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? But everything, it comes back to, all my articles, it comes back to the Galanthi because they're all connected, right? But yeah, this is just my super weird theory. Once again, based on screen appearance, that because to me it doesn't make sense that Myrtle was chained up and unable to speak for 3 years.
Yeah.
So it had to have happened recently. And we know that the Galanthi waking up is having impacts because of the Augie seeing the crows, Lavinia getting headaches even though she is in close proximity to it versus distance. I think that the Galanthi waking up is having an impact on the environment around it. And this is that whole thing about language, because True asks, why is she chained? And Mr. Haplish says infection. Then he makes then he kind of motions to the other kids that they put Myrtle in quarantine. Well, I just can't reconcile in my mind that she has been in quarantine in her family home for 3 years. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So my theory is that she was. We didn't see it because we only focused on the main characters in the montage. But we don't need to see everyone who got spored, because we meet people who got spored through the natural course of the series. Like, we didn't need to see how Annie got spored or how the general got spored or whomever else. So it's possible she got spored. It lay dormant because they specifically reference in the future that not everyone is affected. They don't know why. Well, maybe they're not affected. Maybe it's just a dormant spore that activates at some future time. So my theory goes that Myrtle actually did get sick much more recently, and they chained her up to keep the other kids from getting ill. She died or was near death. The Galanthi waking up, needed eyes and ears and a mouth, as it were. It activated the spore in her. She began to speak crazy languages because it's too much information for a 12 to 17-year-old girl. Their parents thought she was possessed by the devil, so they call in the Reverend. The Reverend informs whomever, and that's how the Trues show up. So that's, as usual, I could be way off base, but I feel like that's kind of how that went down. And it's only because I can't justify the being locked up for so long.
Yeah, I'd not thought about it, actually. I think there are discrepancies in when people's turns kind of come about. Like, I feel like Mary hadn't sung or had that happen up until that point because it just wasn't, it just hadn't come out. So it was there all the time, but it just hadn't activated as such. She
actually does make reference when she's talking to Melody about the song when she's chained up. She says, I use it to comfort myself. So it did crop up at some point before that. But it's that whole thing. You almost have to be hyper vigilant watching the show to catch everything.
To catch all those, yeah. Yeah, no, I was just trying to think. The only other one was kind of Augie. Like, it was happening, but he wasn't almost aware that it was happening.
Okay, yes. Yes, you're absolutely right. So there may be more touched who don't know they're touched because their turns are so subtle.
But I think with Myrtle, yeah, it is strange that it would just, happen so suddenly. And like you say, she wouldn't have been chained up for that long. Yeah, because she's supposed to be like a working girl for them, right? Like, she's...
Yeah, I did a little bit of research on that.
A kid they took in.
Because I was like, okay, well, when were child labor laws? Like, what were child labor laws in the UK at that time? Because I was trying to figure.
Non-existent.
Well, yeah,
I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like
because that's what they make it sound like, that they've taken her in so that she can work.
Yeah.
And help provide income for the family. So why would they keep her locked up for? Yeah, they wouldn't keep her and feed her.
Yeah, like
if she's not providing anything.
Yeah, that's a huge, like, just from an empirical standpoint, that's a huge resource drain because, feeding, washing, toiletries, taken care of, that's a huge drain on a working family in London in 1899. So yeah, I can't. But
so I do think the voices have just started. The reason for why is definitely interesting. So
But listen, my only reason my brain is going there is because of how important language is in the show. Because remember when we meet Lavinia, they're talking about the specificity of modern language. Mm-hmm. So it's an underlying theme in if not the whole show, then at least this episode. But the other thing that really stuck out to me is, and I put screen grabs up in the article, when they escape. And they're in the motor carriage, which, a car that ejects from a horse carriage, Myrtle should be like in total and complete awe, right? But they hold this shot on her for like 5 seconds, and she's looking around, but it's not like with awe and amazement. It's like she's just kind of taking it all in. Like her expression is so specific, so specifically not awe. So I'm like, there's something else going on here.
The first time I saw at the end of the 6th episode with like the flash forward with Myrtle, like my first thing is just kind of like, oh, well, as we're getting towards this more future battle, she's the one that can communicate with the Galanthi. So she's become like the most important player, as it were, and becomes their leader or whatever, because she's the only one that can contact them. And if there are more Galanthi out there, because it's showing her with like all the spacey stuff around, like, can she contact the other Galanthi? That's really all I was thinking. So I've not thought about like whether or not she's, so I was sort of thinking she's just Myrtle, and that's her progression as the series goes on, is she'll learn how to fully communicate like with the Galanthi.
I was on Twitter. I spend most of my time on Instagram, but I'm on Twitter a little bit. I kind of pose questions every now and again. So like when I'm stuck, I'm like, hey, Nevers fans, what do you think of this thing I'm working on? And sometimes I get feedback, sometimes I don't. The interesting thing was most people thought that Myrtle's turn had already played out. I'm like, oh, no. Not at all. We've only just scratched the surface of how Myrtle's going to... And it's only because she was the first character introduced besides the main characters. So early on. And they've used her to great effect while keeping her in the background. I'm like... There's much more going to happen with this character. Just you hold on to your shorts.
Yeah, I think she's probably Myrtle and Melody are the characters I'm kind of looking at most for their progression in these next 6 episodes.
I'm definitely keen on, except for Melody helped them in episode 6. I'm very curious to see.
Yes,
because like I said, it just shows that good part of her is still in there.
See, I'm hoping that her power isn't that her turn is not to take in pain, but it should be to take in any emotion, like empathically from around her. And it's just because she's been through so much pain that's how she channels it. If she could unleash her super strength by feeling the love around her, instead of getting beat up, because that's not a very good superpower, is it? Like, you're getting beat on, you got to be smashed to shit before you can like get your superpower out. It's really terrible. But if you could empathically take in the energy of like love and the support around you from like the group you're with and turn that into super strength, then that's a good power.
I really hope we get to see her journey over the past 3 years in the second half of the season, because you're right. What a contrast that would be of instead of being around other touched and people helping each other, how would her?
Because I'm hoping for a semi-redemption. Now, I feel like she'd get a redemption where she sacrifices herself and ends up dying to save them, because I don't think she's at a point where she can be like fully redeemed and taken in by everybody. So it's that kind of, it's like my whole Kylo Ren thing. I'm like, I'm all for Kylo Ren. I understand where he's coming from. He's had like a shitty upbringing and all this stuff's happened to him. He's been manipulated. He's really only like a young teen when all this stuff happens to him. Mm-hmm. And then you want him to be redeemed because he's starting to see like what's happened. But you know that he can't be fully redeemed because it's not like they're going to take him in and like accept him. He just killed all those people. Yeah. And he's done some terrible things. So I feel like it will be that kind of level of redemption where she comes into the gang to help them at the end, but she won't survive because there's no life for her in like the state that she's in and with those people, unfortunately. But I would like to see at least that. I feel like the Nevers gives a really a really real look at all these characters, and every interaction they have and everything they do is like exactly as they would if it was real.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
and that's the thing. So in episode 5, where Penance and Amalia are like, here's my plan. I like that because Amalia didn't take on a leadership role and be like, no, we're doing my plan, and that's it.
Yes.
She's like, no, this is what I'm doing, and you can come with me, and this is what she's doing, you can go with her. And it's split down lines, but there was no hate. There was no...
Nope.
I mean, there's some irritation because, you need those bodies to help you accomplish your mission, but it wasn't a bone of contention. It's just like, I'm doing this thing, so come with me, or go with her, or do nothing. And it was just very matter of fact. And I really, really like that. Yeah,
I think I mentioned it in the podcast after that episode that it was like one of my favourite moments because it shows you how much they trust and respect and love each other. That they can do that. They're not fighting over it, like you say. They're not hating each other. They recognise each other's core beliefs and how they feel, and they're dealing with it in the only way possible by splitting up and tackling both problems at the same time.
Yeah. And also narratively, I like that when the characters have to go, they have to separate and go on their own missions.
Yeah, it's interesting to see who goes where, because even like obviously like Annie and Nimble go different ways, and they've been like hanging out, getting closer, and you're kind of like, oh, even that's strange. Like, so all these characters that really get along and really care for each other, but are strong enough to go their separate ways and follow their own dreams without being like berated into giving in and just going with their mate, It's like they're not suffering under all that peer pressure. They're just doing what they believe in. And now after going off their separate ways, we've come back to a point where everyone's together and they're going to be like the most badass super team.
Oh, exactly. I know that I saw someone on one of the socials had asked, like, what was with the ending of episode 6 where the balloon inflates and flies off? I'm like, it doesn't mean anything beyond the characters are together again, and we're going to end on a light note because the whole episode was so heavy, right? That, hey, we're back together and we're stronger now than they were before. Now let's end on a little joke just to set the mood going forward.
But also I did mention, I don't think anyone else knows, but I was like, oh, like the balloon thing with like a vessel is called a Zephyr, like an old style.
A Zephyr or Zeppelin?
Well, a Zeppelin is also, but Zephyr is a word for it. So
really?
And I only knew this because in Disneyland in California, they have a ride called the Flying Zephyrs, and you're in like this boat type thing that's got the balloon or whatever on it, and it goes around and it flies. So I always thought that a Zeppelin type thing was called a Zephyr. Also, there's the Red Hot Chili Pepper song that says "Fly away on my Zephyr."
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's nice to see a show that is, can tackle hard issues and is quite dark, but with the characters and the dialogue and even the way that it's filmed, it's quite light-hearted. It's funny. And for me especially, it's like exactly my level of humour. Like little jokes that are made.
Yeah,
not screaming at you in the middle of the screen, just like, oh, that's just a little quip, and if you pick up on it, it's hilarious, but equally, if you don't necessarily pick up on it, it doesn't affect the flow of what's happening.
Well, they use subtlety with near surgical precision, which really appeals to me.
So we've got a fan theory from Berger on Twitter who says straight up that the Galanthi are evil. Remember who else took away people's names? The culty work camp demons that Buffy met in LA. What are your thoughts? So I've not thought about the fact about Galanthi taking away people's names.
So I think there might be a bit of a crossed wires there because we don't know the timeline of things. But in the future, we know that they make a big deal of true names. Like my sacred name. I was married when she says I was married for 3 years and I didn't tell either of them my real name. I think that that thing, that cultural thing, is independent of the Galanthi arriving on Earth.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well, yeah.
I think that's just for whatever happened culturally to humankind over however long was between now and whenever that future is. Yeah, I think that's its own thing. So I don't think the Galanthi came and took away their names. I think that's something that happened on its own, and then the Galanthi showed up to try and help. And I think it would be a disappointing twist if it turned out that the Galanthi were evil, because one, there's been no hints of it, storytelling wise. So much like you, I'm on the belief that I'm taking them at their word. They came here to genuinely help.
Yeah, because you got to think, if they are kind of like, I mean, they're fairly large, and if they're, I don't know what kind of strength they have or powers of their own, just like innately. But you'd think if there was a lot of them, surely they'd be able to take over a planet or do whatever if they so pleased.
Well, yeah, well, exactly, yeah. Like, I mean, the PDC guy, General, he's like, these were just scouts or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, if they can open portals, it'd be like Fringe, the last season of Fringe. They would just all appear and take over the Earth. Bing, bang, boom, you're done. Yeah,
I feel like the Nevers has had, I don't know, a bit of a rough start, which is a shame because I feel like the show is really great. And when I got to work on it, everyone involved, all the crew, were like, this is the next big thing. This is HBO's next huge show. This is the next Game of Thrones. And I was like, awesome. Like, this is going to be amazing. But I feel like it's not hit everybody. Like, I feel... Yeah, I just feel like it was... they haven't pushed it as their next big show. And I don't know if they will with this new showrunner, with this next season, if they're going to really, really push it and get it out there. Because I feel like in England, it was on Now TV, like on Sky, and there were adverts, but other than those adverts, I don't feel there was anything else to kind of like, no one I knew it was coming out or was talking about it. Or
I remember seeing one poster for it, and my thought was, it's just another Victorian. Like, I didn't know it was going to be a sci-fi. I'm like, it's another thing that takes place in Victorian England. I'm like, okay, well, I'm probably not going to watch that. But here in Canada, it's carried on. Bell Media has the licensing for HBO up here, so I've been watching it on their streaming service Crave. But I do feel like that being behind the HBO paywall is also hurting it, because not everyone has access. Like, not everywhere has an HBO license, right? And so I think that is hurting it. But I mean, we also know that good marketing can make a huge difference, and it would be nice if HBO did a big push with the new marketing campaign before the second season or the second half of the season drops. And this is the other problem too, because we're right back to where we were with cable before. Now everyone has their own streaming service, so it's like, if there's 1,000 streaming services, people aren't going to buy them all. So in the end, everyone's going to suffer a little bit. I am hopeful that it's going to go on because of. Did you watch Lovecraft Country? I
did not.
I would very much recommend it. It was a very good show, and unfortunately, it got canceled on HBO. They only did the one season, but it was well received, and it got I think it won a bunch of awards at the Emmys or whatnot. Anyway, but HBO canceled it, and I'm hopeful for the Nevers because they did the first half of the season. And with the unfavorable critical response, the low viewership, they could have canceled it already. But they're still invested in finishing at least the season. So there's a measure of hope there, I think. And hope is the primary theme of the Nevers.
It is. I think one of the upsides they've got is that they're filming it all, and all the production is in the UK, and it is cheaper to do everything in the UK than it is in America. Like, honestly, most of the studios over here are, like, breaking even if they're lucky because they charge so little to the American, film companies that come over. It's crazy. And I think the way that they handle production saved a lot of money because they're not in a studio. They've like got their own base. So I would imagine they're saving a crap ton of money and producing this show at a relatively good rate. Also, the names they've got involved in the show are not like, not like massive names, although I'm sure they will become. But the cast are phenomenal. But there's bigger, like currently with all the streaming services and everything, like I feel like most big name actors are turning to TV. So you're getting TV shows now with like big movie stars in. But yeah, did you want to talk some more about your articles? Because I mean, what's your favourite of the ones that you've written?
Part of me wants to say the Myrtle one because it was so much of a challenge, or such a challenge, whatever the proper English is on that. Honestly, though, I think Portals and Spores and AI Oh My, because I really got to kind of flex, because Matthew has given me a lot of freedom with the writing. He asked for the one specific topic, and he's like, just go to it. I'm like, okay. And that was where I'm like, and I was kind of just rewatching, you're just kind of going over the show, I'm like, what do I think of this? And then it's that whole thing of because like I said, I'm all about on-screen appearance. And then when you look at the graphics used, and okay, you know what it was? It was Rex. It was one shot. In the future, after they shoot the glass and it bounces off and Zephyr gets winged by the bullet, they're all having a discussion, and then Rex bumps into her foot. And then they do a cutaway to Rex bumping in her foot. I'm like, that shouldn't be there. Because you don't show something that prominently. Because in my article, I actually do that screen grab. And you see Rex and you see the name written on it. Like, there's something more here. What is it? So then I started looking into it, and I'm looking at going back over that whole sequence in that episode. And there's all these little things that connect. I mean, the appearance of the Rex AI, it's got those little bubble arms. Rex literally gets mentioned more than characters in that sequence. So like, okay, I'm going to go back over this. I'm really gonna take this apart. Yeah, so it was a fun one to just kind of go a little bit wild and have fun theorizing on it. And I do have another one for you might be interested in. That's not an article. It may not be an article. It may just be a social post. But Boot that betrayed them. We didn't see him die. We saw him get shot and fall back and slide down the wall. It cuts away from him, and he only got shot in the shoulder. And it cuts away from him before he even hits the ground. I bet that guy's still alive and in the past, because there were 5 scientists. Because I was able to do a count. And who was left alive? Zephyr, the PDC general. Why do I want to call him Herringbone? Jesus. Biner, the Crescent, who we haven't... I don't even know where he is in the series. There's like... He's the only one I haven't been able to find hints of. And I thought Rex, the AI, went back. But I think just that had an impact on the Galanthi. I think that Boot is one of the bad guys, and I don't think I'm 100% confident that Masson is Masson. Like, he's not. He's the person he's supposed to be. But I wonder if the Bigger King. I feel like Boot could be the Bigger King, and it's only because of the intensity in both of their eyes. That's the only thing I'm going on. Because Boot, like the actor who played him, has those really, really intense eyes, right? So yeah, I got a little sidetracked, but yeah, Portals and Spores is kind of my favorite one to write so far, because I just kind of got to absolute freedom to just investigate and throw my theories up there. So
articles and now videos. So your first video is going to be published actually the same day as this episode is released. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, this is kind of... I threw it out there to Matthew, and he was all for it, because I was curious about the engagement of video versus text articles. I know I read somewhere that blog posts, like these days, blog posts don't do as well relative to their video counterparts. So like, well, let me make a video, like turn these articles into video and see how it works. Because like some people just don't have time to, they don't have time to sit down and read, or they just, reading a blog post just doesn't do it for them. Like for example, me, I like video because I audio visual really speaks to me. So I'm like, well, why don't we see if we can turn this one piece of content into more than one piece? So I'm like, well, let me do some video and we'll put it up and see if people like that. So yeah, it's basically it's a variation on the article, but I've added a couple things that I mentioned the brooch that I didn't pick up on before. So it's not like a cut and paste, like I just turned on a video camera and read the article. No, it's I've added some clips and some additional things that have come to my mind later. So it's still its own thing, but it's based in the information presented in the article, and I will probably do that moving forward. And and then you and I can potentially discuss at the same time. So it just more ways to share information ideally for fans of this podcast to engage with us further.
Yeah, I think I do most of my kind of like, I mostly read stuff online just because it's like when I'm sitting and I've got a moment. My brother, he's a gamer, and my friend who's a gamer as well. So when they're at their PC and they're gaming, they've always got like another window open with some kind of video.
Right.
Whoever they're following online, doing a review of something or just talking about whatever.
And like I said, it's just the idea is just to make this more accessible because you've been doing good work over here, and I think we need more fans to come over and check it out.
If anyone wants to like share their thoughts and like start discussions of their own and start talking crazy theories like we have, you can head over to the website to The Tavern, which is basically like our forum, so you can all start chatting and engaging with each other and talking random theories.
Yeah. I've actually just started this because I realize not everyone's on Twitter, or not Twitter, pardon me, Instagram, and I do have that character limit. So I have to be very, very, very choosy with my words when I'm doing the scene breakdowns. So I just posted my very first one over in the tavern. So because I'm basically taking my Instagram posts and I'm going to start migrating them over there, where I can kind of get a little bit more in depth, and hopefully some people who will come over and check that out. The very first one is just my thoughts on the opening montage, just like when I was like, hey, this is really efficient storytelling.
It's nice to have a place as well, because with Instagram, like, you don't always necessarily like check in and go to your pages that you follow. So like, unless you like catch it as you're like, scrolling through that day, it's like easy to miss stuff sometimes. So it's nice to have, a dedicated place where people can go and like read your thoughts and talk to each other.
It's just more central, because I imagine the idea is that, hey, Nevers fans, come over and check out HBO theneverspodcast.com, because this is where all the stuff is that we're doing, and you can engage with us and you can engage with other fans in one central location. So I'm definitely, my plan is to get more active over there as well. And it's a good site. There's a lot here to go through. I was kind of overwhelmed the first time I checked it out. Because I found you guys, because what happened is I found the Nevers, and then I found your podcast. So it was one of the few times I actually listened at work, because I really wanted to hear what you guys had to say. Now I've only recently started going back all the way to the beginning, but I started with episode 1 where you and Schrog were talking about that. So I've been listening to you and him and whatnot for several months, I guess. Yeah,
it's been a while now.
I mean, this has nothing to do with anything. It just, hey, I found you guys after I found the Nevers, and I hope other fans do too, because it's... And I understand, I think early on, there was some conversation about this podcast versus the official one. Mm-hmm. And the official one feels like a dessert. Like, it just... a couple people, hey, let's laugh and talk with the show, like have a good time together and interview and have a quick chat with the stars. But it doesn't have the depth that this one does, and that's what drew me into this podcast. And now I'm talking on it, which is super cool because I didn't think that was going to happen.
Yeah, it's nice to hear. I mean, like you say, it's not like a competition between like the official podcast and ours, but it's nice. You know, they are very different, and you know, it's nice that a lot of people have said that they prefer ours because it is like ours is like just a couple fans nerding out and like delving deep into what's going on. Yeah, exactly. And the official one, like you said, is more like a, you know, obviously they've got access to the actors and like in a much more direct way, like being right there and just kind of having a laugh. Yeah,
I would describe very much as a dessert where this is a meal.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
So I guess finishing up here, I had a final thought. So talking about like where we think the Galanthi is going to go in the next half of the season or even in later seasons, I was thinking to myself, like if the goal is to kind of like get the Earth to a place where, you know, humans aren't going to destroy themselves and they feel like they've reached that goal. And if the Galanthi is still around and they decide to like head off back to their home or whatever, do you think that anyone would be aware that they were there? Or like after the spores hit, do you think everyone's memory, like everyone who's got turns, maybe their turns will disappear and all their memories will be wiped? Because that's like, whoa. They've clearly got the power to erase people's memory.
That would be a good payoff to that setup.
Because a world that's been fixed, but you know it's been fixed by some exterior force, and like you're now living in this world where you know about that, would that be weird? Would it be better to fix the world knowing that like humans are going to be fine and have nobody have any recollection of like why this is just like how the world is and how it always was and everything's happy? Like, I don't know, it just popped into my head.
I will say that what we know of the future they established is that knowing an alien was involved certainly caused the conflict between the PDC and the Free Lifers. And I apologize to anyone. I realize I've been saying PDC when I meant Free Lifers a couple times earlier, so just know what I meant. I reversed those a couple times. I'm sorry. I should be better than that. But yeah, I mean that the Galanthi being there and quote unquote interfering is what is the central cause of that conflict. So maybe you're onto something there that will help, and then you'll forget we were even here and you'll think you did it all on your own. Huh.
That's my final Galanthi thought for the day.
That's interesting. I'm curious to see how it'll play out. I would be surprised to see the Galanthi be an element beyond season 1, or at least this particular one. And they said, I mean, other Galanthi may duck in and out, and we also have the future episode. Like, they've established this future, so we have something to cut back to, so it's never really gone. If that makes sense.
Yeah, because only Malady remembered the first the sporing, so it's like. But no one saw it. Like, no one from out of anywhere. Like, so it's weird. Yeah,
because even the touch don't remember.
No one remembers. And it's like no one... And it's not even like the spores only fell on London, but surely someone living over a few miles away from London would have looked over and seen this giant alien ship. Like... Yes. But no one has any recollection, so it's not even like necessarily just the people that the spores hit forgot. And like you said, it would cause friction. I mean, at the moment only the small crew of people know that the Galanthi exists, so if they manage to fix the world and it's only them, then there's no reason to, like, you know, no one else is going to know about it. But also, would it be nice if those people went back to like normal little lives and just forgot about everything that happened? I don't know.
Oh, it'll be interesting to see. It'd definitely be interesting to see. And that's the best. Once again, like I said, that's the best part. We can discuss this, and then we get to see how our theories play out. And like right or wrong, it's still a joy to talk about it. I'm very curious. In particular, I'm curious to see how close or far I was because what can I say? I like validation.
Well, I think from very early in the Nevers, I was kind of like, oh, that Amalia, she's from the future, innit? I was like, she's not just like a little Victorian lady. There's something going on here. She's something she's not, or she's from the future, or she's. And then as the episodes were going on, and she kept mentioning, I'm not from here. You know, and this is right from the very beginning. She's dropping these little lines like that. I was like, oh, 100%. So I'm glad that I got my payoff with that. And I was like, cool. I was right because.
well, the best part too is because it's they didn't hit you over the head with a sledgehammer with it. It just little snippets, just enough to be what? What?
And the other bit I liked was when it's Mary's song and you see it in Myrtle's face. I was like, you see that she's hearing what they're saying. Mm-hmm. And for me, I was worried that it was like something really bad, like you're all gonna die, or you know, something like that. But you know, the shock wasn't because she was hearing something horrific. It was just because she was hearing something when nobody else was.
I will say things I liked is that same episode when, you know, they've translated it and they tell True and Penance and True has that moment where she breaks down. Like that was impactful. But I will say my favorite episode in the first 6 is 6, and in particularly Molly's story. And I'm not afraid to say that I choke up a little bit because you have done a fantastic job of setting up these characters, and then in something like 6 or 10 minutes, you tell their story about how the world just ground this bright, hopeful young woman to friggin' dust. And it's very sad. And I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's very nicely done. I was just going to say that I feel like the structure of the show and the way it is so subtle and understated, and the way that it kind of pulls you in and out, doesn't, you know, throw it in your face. And even in the very last episode, we're given something that's like crazy out there, that with the like chapters, and
yeah,
as a viewer you're kind of like, what's going on? But
yeah, exactly. I love that. How do I want to say it? I feel glad I'm not the only person who's like, am I watching the wrong show? Did they upload the wrong thing to this?
I did that.
And you know what? It's a little jarring, but because, like I said, the structure of the episode makes it's very, very satisfying. Because we get to meet the true Zephyr, Claudia Black. So you don't hire someone like that then never revisit the future in future episodes.
So yeah, I think that's all of our Galanthi talk. I'm sure we could talk for many, many hours more about the Galanthi and everything else, including Batman and Star Wars. And
I think so for sure.
But I guess we should kind of wrap up our first conversation together. And I mean, you know, that's it for this episode. But I need to say a massive thank you to everyone who's listening. And I need to say a massive thank you to Jason. You know, thank you so much for joining me today.
It was a pleasure.
Where can our listeners find you if they want to follow you online, Jason?
Okay, I apologize because there's a lot more than I thought there were. But primarily I'm on Instagram. That's kind of, Instagram is where I hang out the most. That's at Jason C. Marshall, and that's where I do my Nevers breakdowns and other screenwriting related things. Twitter a little less so, but I'm getting more active, and that's at Jason Marshall CA. I do movie reviews with some friends over at Zero Theory Media. That's where we do all our filmmaking stuff, and I'm also on the SBP podcast, the Susie Batella podcast, which is all about mobile filmmaking, and where we're specifically talking about story structure, and we're just getting into that now. We kind of did the overview. We talk about acts, you know, the 4-act structure, because I don't like 3 acts. It just bothers me. And then we're going to start getting into the story beats and then scenes and character. We're basically going to break it all down, and we use examples. I'm actually going to be using Wonder Woman and Serenity as the examples. So that anyone following be like, okay, you're talking about, the prologue beat, but what does that mean? So I was like, okay, well, the prologue is the opening. In Wonder Woman, it's this. In Serenity, it's this, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's everything. I'm always active, so if you want to talk Galanthi or filmmaking or whatnot, just hit me up, because I like to chat about all this stuff, as I guess now you're well aware. Oh, I say, what about you? You're on social, but not quite as much as me.
Yeah, I'm not like super present on social. I have my Instagram, which is mostly just like nerdy things, new figurines that I buy.
It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect.
But that's Laura JP 1721, which is also my Twitch name. I changed it so it's the same. It was Pain, which is a character from Final Fantasy X Part 2 that I've used for like every game character that I've had since then, when I was like 10 or whatever. But yeah, if you enjoyed the podcast, then we would, of course, like it if you left us a positive review. Again, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Amazon Music Podcasts, YouTube, and wherever else you stream your podcasts. For more Nevers-related content, you can find us on the web at hbothenevers.com. You can look at us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at hbothenevers, and also at the Nevers Podcast, and the famous at the Nevers Podcast without the A, because, that wasn't available on Twitter, much like your name, Jason. Any comments or questions, if you want to jump into the conversation, you can send them to theneverspodcast at gmail.com. And please, if you're listening and you're enjoying all of this content, you can also rate and review our podcast and help us reach more listeners. But yeah, until next time, this has been the Nevers Podcast. Thank you so much, Jason, again, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
But from us for now, that's goodbye from the Nevers Podcast.
This episode of the Nevers Podcast was written, produced, and edited by Matthew at Culture Inject Studios. The intro and outro music was produced by Guilherme Moraes. We are more than just a podcast. We're a fan community. You can keep up to date on the Nevers and chat with other fans by visiting hbothenevers.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search HBO The Nevers, all one word, and click that follow button. The Nevers Podcast is not endorsed by Mutant Enemy, Warner Media Entertainment, or any of its subsidiaries, including Home Box Office, HBO, and is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. The Nevers and all names, pictures, and audio clips are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective copyright holders.